everybody.
Hi.
Look at the rising masses have come to join us. Are we what?
Are we recording all around?
Yes, we
Oh,
are.
we've been recorded this whole time. That whole snafu with the sound, all on video. Yeah.
The bloopers
Learning
reel.
experience.
The blooper
Yeah.
reel. The funny thing is like one of my main troubleshooting things I always say as a joke with teachers is, you know, it's not working, it's not working. Is it on? And I just fell victim to my own thing. This is a new thing for me, and I've got heavy feet too, so I just knew that. But so I wasn't familiar with that, but hey, I figured it out. Yay. Anyway, that's why we didn't have sound. It wasn't on. Anyway, my name is Miguel Rodriguez. That's me down there. That's why Pam should have gone first because she's listed first. But we've got Twitters too. Talk to us on the Twitters.
Yeah, I'm Pam Rabin. I work for San Diego Unified in the Instructional Technology Department. I'm a graduate of the San Diego State Ed Tech Department. Yeah. And we're here to show you basically a little bit about how the Promethean technologies work and how we use them in our districts and what to expect if student teachers are coming into classrooms in San Diego Unified or
We both have
general
classroom
classrooms
experience.
that have smart boards.
Yeah.
I've taught second, third grade. I have 21 years with our district. I'd say about 15 of those I've been in using technology in my classroom of some sort and integrating and trying to use whatever I can to make the best experience for my students and keep them engaged and make sure that I am creating lessons that are engaging and meet all the different needs of my students.
Let's go on. Anyway, so we called this, we struggled with what to call this. We built this yesterday, but I'll say that we planned for months. The title, Building a Student-Centered Learning Environment, because that is what we do. And we decided to focus on Promethean tools to maximize engagement because that is my expertise personally, and also it is what we have invested a lot of money and time into with San Diego Unified School District where we work. I have worked for Promethean in the past training teachers, and I taught third grade with the Promethean board starting in 2002, way back in the ancient days of Promethean, like rock and slate kind of days. 2002. Anyway.
And just in our experience, once you learn a program, you know, we picked Classflow to show today through Promethean, but once you learn a presentation software, they all pretty much work the same way. So a lot of those skills are kind of underlying and
Right, exactly.
transfer to whatever new program happens to come out.
And we definitely want that to be something that is communicated with upcoming teachers too. It's something I tell teachers because they're always worried and they always want to become an expert at that one thing. It's like that one thing could go away next year. You're the...
And it probably will.
Yeah, you're the person who matters. The tool is just a tool. It's just something that you use. So, but yeah, to use it well, you have to become comfortable with it, and that's what this is all about. So we always like to talk about our objectives or what we're going to do for the day. We've gone through this a bunch of times, but we're going to try to keep this really focused so we don't waste anybody's time. The first thing, Pam, we'll talk about the bigger picture.
We want to give a bigger picture about what the technology looks like in an integrated environment to make sure that student teachers really understand how it all fits together, how it works, how it supports students. And part of that, as you're doing trainings, would be to give them an experience. So it's kind of the big picture of here, a little bit to talk about design, curriculum design, universal design for learning, which was really modeled after, I think it began with buildings and how to create access for different people to enter buildings like in architecture. And the same thing has been applied to lesson design. And just to start with a little bit of around that with teachers is helpful.
Okay, so we did mention already, jumped the gun a tad by talking about how you can use any kind of tool. We're going to talk about Promethean tools today. So once Pam talks a little bit more about some of our vision through San Diego Unified and why we've done what we've done, at least as we understand it, I'll talk about some of the specifics of the Promethean tools, what they actually are, what they do, how they plug in, how they work, how they turn on, and that sort of thing. So this is hardware, then we'll go to software. Software are the programs that you use. Well, with Promethean, it's all K-12 based, so it's lesson delivery software. For years, we've been using something called Active Inspire, so you probably have heard that word before. That is still in the district, but we're moving a little bit more toward Classflow. So we're going to focus more on Classflow today. I'll talk about why later. In order to do that, we will.
And we would like to have students, and we'd like to have you today, actually experience some elements of a Classflow lesson so you can kind of get the idea of the interactivity of it and give you some examples to kind of build that vision. And then at the end, we'll talk about where to access additional resources, how to access help on your own. I think the biggest thing we can teach student teachers is that a lot of the programs now have that built in, that they can either go to the help within the program or they can go to Google and look something up. And that is honestly what we do as instructional technologists when we're getting ready to train people. We go and we teach ourselves. And given the budgets and given trainings that are getting cut more and more, if teachers, student teachers can learn to teach themselves a technology, that's a huge skill for them.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start off just with a little bit of the bigger picture, and I'm going to go over this very quickly. The idea here is that there is a variety of learners in our classrooms. They have a variety of strengths, and we wouldn't want to just ask one student to do the exact same thing as all students. So the technology allows us to diversify a little bit easier, to anticipate some students' needs, and to, from the onset of instruction, think about the scaffoldings that students need, or as we're looking at student work, we can bring in scaffoldings, and as we see that students don't need them anymore, we can take them away. So technology allows us to easily put those things in place, copy them into other lessons so that we can build on them and make them work for our students, share them with partners around in the school district, and truly begin to create a more personalized experience for students. Okay.
Yep, I think we're good. I would say that building that personalized experience can include things like paper, pencil, so it's not
Certainly.
like technology is one more piece of the puzzle. Or, yeah, exactly. Yay, this is me? That's me. Yeah, so I want to talk about the hardware now, what some of these things have in a lot of our classrooms. You actually can see some of it hanging off, lots of little peaks. This is an older picture. But I have a link here to a website that I'm building for our own teachers to kind of, particularly new teachers and incoming teachers, for them to get an idea of like, oh, what is all this stuff? I'm calling it our Classroom Tech Toolbox. It used to be called the i21 Classroom. I don't know if you've heard the i21 brand before, but that is something that no longer exists. So I've been kind of revamping things. And I want to keep it really simple. So if I showed you my old online instructional thing, it looks like a big mess. This, I really literally just keep it really straightforward. What are things? What do they do? What can you expect to see? And hopefully that'll make things a little easier. And keep the verbiage very, very simple. So there are many classrooms in San Diego Unified, but the tools can have some slight differences. That's right up front, so that's important. Check here for an overview. The teacher tablet, so the computers that teachers have, is the center of the classroom, the most important thing. Of course, the active board. In this room, we've got an active panel. So that's an example, actually, of these slight differences. The boards that we have mostly in the district are older than this, but the idea is generally the same. And it is really, I'm using that, but I'm using it in a way that you all can see it. So it takes the computer, which we all have had, and makes it less of a solitary experience. I can now share what I'm learning with the crowd. That's really all the board does. But of course, with the different softwares and apps, you could be really creative about how you share your computer with others. Pens to control it.
Yeah, and I was going to say, different classrooms in our they do have different boards, so some of them are touch, some are not. But generally speaking, the experience for the students, if they're coming up to the board or they're interacting, is similar.
But ultimately, they're all doing identical things. They're controlling that. None of them are doing anything different. Whatever I'm doing up there, I can do down here, and vice versa. They're the same thing. This is just my computer. I'm going to stress that a lot. All right, the pens. Here's an example of an active pen I'm not using. I could if I wanted to, but I have touch capability, and it's kind of fun to do touch. So, I will say that if I was going to annotate, the pen is easier to use. But for mouse purposes, it's your mouse.
Yeah, and the pens can be very specific to which board you have in which classroom. So if they're having pen issues in their classroom, they might want to check and make sure that they have the right pen for the board.
These next two monsters are the biggest reason, in my opinion, that this is a preferable, although more expensive, system to what we have in the district. Is you don't have a projector. This active panel is creating its own image, so it's brighter, it's prettier, it's HD. We can have the lights on. We don't have to look like we're in a cave like we do in our classrooms right now, because the projectors are kind of dim. Projectors require a lot of maintenance, but they are out there, so we want to let people know that they are.
And if I can throw in, if they find themselves in a classroom where they have a bulb that is starting to go out, they can maybe nicely tell their teacher that that's something they can call in and someone will come out and fix it. So they may suggest that. And I don't know how they would go about doing it, but they would suggest that.
Maybe have a good relationship with their mentor teacher first. I had a mentor teacher once. I don't know if I would have said anything, but yeah, but we want everybody to call the help desk for all these things, and our help desk will eventually get to it.
There will be teachers on site who know how to put in tickets with the help desk or who can
Exactly.
figure out.
And we want to see trends of these things happening, and the only way the trends become apparent and visible is if they're called in. Anyway, so there's also a remote control, which looks like that. The thing about a Promethean projector, I don't know if you know this, but there's only one way to turn it on and off, and that's with the remote. There's no buttons on the projector, which is
And it's important
really-
to point that remote control at the projector, not at the board.
Yeah.
And if they're on this side of this projector, they're pointing it at this little black square. And sometimes if they're on the other side, they think it's not working.
Right, yeah, so basically it's like TVs from 1980, where you have to point the remote at the exact little, you know. I do want to say one more thing about the projector too. I lost it. Anyway, maybe it'll come back to me.
Well, one thing that they have to do with the projector boards is on occasion calibrate the pens.
Right.
And we will, hopefully, maybe we can get a link in here that would show them how to, we have tons of videos in our district on
We
how to
do.
calibrate. So we'll connect that in here.
There are a couple of ways to be able to do that.
Just to know that if they're trying to write on the board and the pen is off from where they're, I don't think you don't have to calibrate these, or?
I think you still can, but you definitely don't
Not
have
as
to,
often.
not nearly as often, because calibration, for those of you who don't know, if you don't know, I don't know if you do or not, but a lot of people don't understand what that means. A lot of people think that that's a troubleshooting way or a way to make the board work. If you need to calibrate a Promethean board, everything's working great and working fine. All that the calibration means is where the projector is shooting the image is matching where your pen is touching. So it's all about just like alignment, but it's working okay. So, you know, I'll get calls from teachers or emails from teachers who, this is my computer's cursor, and I want to be able to move that around and control the cursor with the pen, and they're not able to do that, and they're like, I'm trying to calibrate, and the calibration doesn't come into play if you can't do that. The other thing I wanted to say about the Promethean projector is the projector just shows your computer up here. I wanted to mention that up here. The document camera, you've got a hover cam here. We mostly have the Samsung digital presenters in our district, a discontinued model that doesn't get made anymore. So we have another model called the Ladybug that has gone into classrooms. It's a red, very nice document camera actually, but it's also very expensive. So right now we're kind of looking into what we're going to replace broken
But there will be some.
Samsung, but there will be, we just don't know what it is yet. But in any case, just like all the different kinds of boards do the same thing, these generally do the same thing. It's a digital camera on a stick, so I can stick an image up here and it'll show up there. Some of them you can annotate over the image and take pictures and take video and all that kind of good stuff. Audio systems, this is...
Yeah, I was going to talk
yeah.
about the audio systems. So all the classrooms in our district that have an I-21 suite have microphones.
Mhm.
So the computer sounds will go through the audio system, but you also have a microphone that goes through the audio system. And we highly, highly, highly recommend teachers wear those, and student teachers also, because of the research behind the microphones. And there's a lot of research out there that shows that when teachers wear microphones, all of the class feels included, rather than speaking up really loudly, and the kids in the front row may think you're angry, or they're, you know, your voice, your tone is different when you're trying to shout out to a large classroom. when they're wearing the microphones, not only can the tone of the room be kind of quieted down, but the kids in the back row, the kids in the sides of the room, they're all hearing the teacher's voice, they're hearing the crispness of their language, they're hearing, your English language learners are hearing those S's and those P's and those T's, and they're just able to process that information a lot more. A lot of teachers don't like wearing them because they feel like they're a stewardess on an airplane broadcasting, you know, or that, and
They don't like the sound of their own voices.
a lot of that is because they don't like hearing their own voice, or they've walked past classrooms where the teachers have the volume up way too high and they don't want to be that teacher. So our advice is to put the microphone on, find your audio system. It's in a cabinet in the room next to the whole teacher stand. Start talking and turn the volume up till you can hear yourself, and then start turning it down as you're talking. And the minute you cannot hear yourself talking anymore, then you know you have a pretty good balance of the sound in the classroom.
The speakers are in front, over the kids' desks, not really over
Yeah,
yours.
they're kind of all around. You
So-
have 4 speakers placed around the room. The
If you're
other
really
thing
hearing
is,
yourself, you're too loud.
they also have a second microphone, which is great for students. So you do have to train the students how to use them, or they want to put them up to their mouth like a microphone and talk into them. They want to play with them. But if they take the time to train students, when a student comes up to the board and they're showing their work, or if the teacher's walking over to a desk and saying, "Can you restate that, please?" and they can hand it to the student, I don't recommend it for quick pair shares. It's just, it becomes more of a distraction, or even if it's a quick, "Hey, Miguel, can you tell us what you were thinking?" But if you're taking the time to have a student come up, then give them the microphone and teach them how to use it. Because now, again, it could be just a conversation between me and Miguel because the kids in the back of the room can't really hear what he's saying. As soon as we hand them a microphone, it's a conversation with the whole class.
Yeah, it's a public speaking. The port replicator, I want to point out, I do say only in some classrooms. So this is like a dock, and we don't have one here, but you will notice many, many wires. And the port replicator, well, as a district, actually, I don't know if we're gonna purchase anymore. But ultimately what it is, we call it the little black box, and all of the goodies that plug into your computer. So all of these things, actually all of these things we've been talking about, the board, the document camera, the projector, they all go into this. So the computer's the center of the universe. And all of those require wires, and it does get a little bit messy. The port replicator is one way you can kind of keep them all in one place. So the classrooms that have it, they started with like the 4th year of this rollout that we did.
They'll just see them sitting on the desktop. So if they
Yeah.
see one on the desktop,
Actually, most of them have been installed under the desk, although some teachers are smart.
teachers are bringing them up.
Yeah, put it up, because that would drive me crazy to
But
have to
they'll
do it
have
under my
one
desk.
wire that comes out and just
Yeah.
one plugs into the computer.
Right.
And I'll say most of the time the teachers understand how that works. They may not always remember to check the wires, but they kind of know that it does have to be plugged in. Newer
Mhm.
teachers, maybe not, but I think most of your veteran teachers have gone through the training.
Yeah.
Again, it's just sort of a place where if they're troubleshooting, they can check, make sure all those wires are plugged in correctly, make sure that the wire's plugged into the
Yeah,
computer.
and we'll get into more troubleshooting stuff. Yeah, wires, speaking of which. So these are, I always like to name the wires because people are afraid of wires. It's true. So there are different kinds of wires that connect to each piece of your computer. I do have black USB and gray USB listed. I'm gonna caveat this a little bit. First of all, this is an our district thing, and our district did our best, but
It's not always.
it's not always the case. So what they wanted to do was try to color code it, so the black USB was always for the board, and the gray USB was always for the document camera, and in most cases that's the case, but ultimately it doesn't matter. If you see a cord, plug it in. But anyway, so yes, the black USB connects the board to your computer so that the pen will work, and also speakers on the board will work if you have that kind of board in your classroom. The projector VGA, the big monster, that will plug either into your computer or the port replicator that connects your computer to the projector, which we don't need here.
And the majority of our boards have that kind of
Yeah.
connection for the projector.
They're all SD because they're projected. So.
A couple schools don't.
No HD on that. The gray USB connects the document camera to the computer so you can take pictures, take video, and annotate over your document camera image. And then there's the headphone plug. That, for our schools, you actually have a choice with most classrooms. to have the audio from your computer play through the speakers on the board or the surround sound in the room. Now, the big idea was to play through the surround sound in the room for the same kinds of reasons we were discussing earlier. And if you want to have the surround sound in the room, you need to have the headphone plugged in, so you'll see that as well. And that's basically it. I will say this, just in case you get this question from student teachers who are going out into the field. Some things were built into some rooms as just in cases. So there was this vision that in 10 years, 15 years, every room was going to have Apple TV, or every room was going to have this, that, or that. And in anticipation of something like that, some of the rooms in certain years had HDMI cords built into to the whole system. And so what that means is a lot of rooms just have this, you know, all the wires, and we always tell people if you see a wire, plug it in. Well, the HDMI might not plug into anything, and so everybody's like, well, what is this one for? And then we would say, oh, well, that one, nothing. It's just kind of hang. I mean, I guess if you bring like your own in, you could plug something in, or yeah. But it has actually been very useful now because we have the Chromebooks. So the Chromebooks have, so that's a beautiful thing. All right. Oh, not yet. Because we have the most important part of this section under my getting started, which is, first of all, here's a look at some of the Promethean boards we have. Most of the boards look like this with speakers. The older ones look like this. This is the one I taught with myself. I think it's, you know, kind of nice. I like how simple it is. But troubleshooting, this is what I really wanted to talk about. So I'm focusing here on the pen not working because the pen is what, or touch, the pen and touch we use interchangeably. That is what gives interactivity to the use of the interactive whiteboard. And so there are some things to look at if the pen's not working or speaker's not working. And just like earlier today, is your board on? So that's always a big one. The newer boards like this have on-off buttons.
On the left hand.
Yes, they're on the side. They want to glow green. The funny thing is, and the reason we have to kind of tell people this again and again, is you don't ever have to turn them off, so people forget they exist. Like if it was something I had to turn off at the end of every day, you just remember that. But honestly, you just leave it on. However, if the power goes off in your school and comes back up, that thing's gonna be off unless you go and push the button. So it causes me having to drive 50 miles to a school to push a button I'm done. The USB dance. So if something's not working, is everything plugged in?
And then sometimes just unplugging and plugging it back in.
Yeah, check to make sure it's plugged into the computer. If it is, try unplugging and replugging. You can also try unplugging and replugging into an alternative USB port. And if you have a port replicator, one of these guys, then you could look at the port replicator section, which basically says the same thing. Because that might either go into your computer or go into that. And that's basically it. None of this is actually really difficult. Is it on? Is it plugged in? That's kind of it. I noticed that our speaker turned off somehow. Now we're on again. It turned itself off. Interesting. Anyway, are there any questions about the hardware? Okay. Now. You can go forward page. Oh yeah, I did want to say this. Okay, I just want to say this really quickly, just because this has always light bulbed for my teachers who I was training. Promethean boards are really just a way to display and control a computer. So everybody thinks that this is super like new crazy technology when they're first seeing it and really fancy like Star Trek, and it really isn't. It really is just that. So
It's a big glorified mouse.
It's just a big glorified mouse. There we go. It plugs into your computer the same way too, right? USB.
Okay, so we have two different types of software, and we wanted to say that some teachers will use Active Inspire. That's a
Most will at this point.
Most will be using that. That exists on their teacher's computer. It's a software that you have to download. And it is also a software that pretty soon is not going to be available to our district anymore, I think because of a operating system issue.
So, yeah, can I elaborate on that?
Tiny bit, sure.
All right, just really quickly. Just because that could be a little bit misleading. Active Inspire could be around for 2 to 3 more years, depending on whether or not the Windows updates that will come in the future inevitably, and we're talking like Windows 11, 12, 13, 4 million, are compatible with it or not. The real deal here is Promethean is going full Classflow. Promethean is abandoning Active Inspire. So they are going to not make any more updates, and that is what the problem is. So as long as everything kind of stays status quo, it will be available and teachers can use it as they always have. And that's also not to say that when Windows 11 comes out and the district actually decides to put it into the district, it won't work. It may or may not, that's the thing. But Classflow is the way, so we're gonna focus on that.
Yep. And Classflow is, for us, an online
Yes.
application.
Yep.
Okay. So what we wanted to do, and what we think is also important, is if you are showing Classflow to your students as a means of working with students, it's really important to experience Classflow for yourself as a student.
Mhm.
So we have in our trainings a unit on water that we walk teachers through in about a 5-hour period of training. So we've scaled that way down just so you can experience some of the interactive elements of
I'm gonna
Classflow.
be a student too.
You're gonna be a student? Okay. So we have an all about water unit, and this unit would be, we're sort of starting at the beginning of the unit, sort of the launch of a longer 6-week unit. But what I'd like you to do is we're going to start by joining our Classflow classroom. So I need you to get on your own Chromebooks that you have out, or you can be on your devices that you brought with you, but you're needing to go to Chrome, because Classflow works best in Chrome. And I would like you to go to classflow.com/student. And once you get into classflow.com/student, you can join as a teacher or a student.
No, no.
You have to go, oh,
If
there
you go to
join as a
Classflow,
student.
yeah, that's
I'm
student
sorry.
only.
And you're gonna type in this join code.
It will also ask you for your name if your teacher hasn't already created a class.
And we're doing what's called an open class, which means that you just join it and you put your name in. Okay, and I can tell I have 3 people. Miguel, are you coming to my class?
Watch out, don't fall.
Okay. So
I have a lovely landscape, which tells me that I'm in.
Oh, there we
ready to
are,
go.
4th person is in now. Okay, so I'm gonna come here. And the first thing that we would want students to do is sort of make a connection to the learning. So I'm gonna send out a question here. I'd like you to be honest. Rate yourself as a water conservationist with 1 on the Likert scale, meaning that you think you are a complete water waster. 2 would be I make some effort. 3, I try as hard as I can. 4, I'm a super conservationist. And 5, I'm just off the grid and I'm ready for Mad Max. I do my own thing. So I'm gonna send out.
Yeah, I guess say what you're doing is.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna send out a question to your devices. You notice you don't have anything right now. You probably have a lovely landscape. The intention of the landscape is to keep students' attention focused on the teacher. So they know that they're connected, it will change. Teachers might want to give students a head up that not everyone's going to necessarily have the same picture or image at the same time. They get a little preoccupied by that. But when I'm ready as a teacher, I can send out the question to you. I'm going to send out, I have a choice here of a creative page, which is just a blank page that they can add on to, they can write, they can add pictures. I can send out a word seed, we'll show that later. Text, number, multiple choice questions. My Likert scale's right here, true, false, or yes, no. So I'm choosing a Likert scale. We've made it a generic 5-choice Likert scale. And when I hit start poll, you'll notice that your screens will change. One thing you need to know, on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen is a blue submit button. So you're not done entering your information until you hit that submit button.
Yeah, did you actually send the question? I don't think you sent it.
Again.
Oh, interesting. Maybe it's because we're screencasting and we're using your faulty screencasting.
Thanks, Miguel.
Just out of
Now
curiosity.
we're on.
Oh, that is why. Yeah. Yeah, we're on a limited connection. All right, this is a good time to say this. All right, so.
This would be a good time for us to edit this part out of the video.
No, actually, no, we're gonna keep this in the video because these kinds of things are really important, to be honest. Mistakes are just as critical as anything else. Now, honestly, this isn't a mistake, but we talked about the difference between Active Inspire and Classflow, and we really didn't get into that too much. Active Inspire is an application on the computer. It is not reliant upon an internet connection. It is, however, teacher directed. Now you can get students one at a time or maybe pairs or threes even up to the board, but you still have a class of students who have to pay attention to something. That's one of the drawbacks, right? So Classflow is a way to try and get, because we have an environment of student devices like Chromebooks, try to get everybody engaged and make it more student-centered, more collaborative. However, the drawback is it is reliant upon an internet connection. So I'm going to do something crazy, and I'm going to unplug the Ethernet.
Okay.
And we're going to try to rely on the San Diego
State wireless?
SDSU guest wireless, which I know might not be the best in the world.
And there we go. Yay!
Yay! That was it.
Okay, so you should have your Likert scale in front of you. You'll choose which number and hit the submit button. So as you can see, as teachers, we have our students' responses, and we can have a conversation around what students have said as they.
So did you guys see how I
conservationists.
changed that or found our data?
So we had to change, because we lost the connectivity, we actually just had to move on to the next screen, and then we went back and it was all in there.
I actually went back.
It kind of was like hitting the refresh button.
It was a refresh button. It was like out of that page, back into it.
To refresh.
And
Hopefully we won't continue
our
that.
goodies were all there. And because we sent it twice, I think we have 2 pages of
Okay,
data.
so I'm gonna send out another response. This is a text question, and we're going to do what's called a word seed. So I will send a question to you. What is one way that people use water?
You'll have to stop that one.
And just 1 or 2 words, different ways that you know that people use water. So student responses come in. The teacher has the ability then to either have students come up to the board and start moving these things around for drinking, a different kind, for bathing, for showers. So if I tap here and I draw down to here, I can make connections between words. We would send something out like this the first time, and hopefully, like I said, get a bunch of categories, and we can have that conversation with students. And then I would actually go ahead and send it out a second time and say, okay, look at what's up here, think a little deeper now, send it out to my students again. And when we do this with the training with 40 teachers, we wind up getting things like agriculture, or that we use water for farming, animals, that kind of thing. So then the next stage of this would be that we can put up essential questions, we can have our learning goals up there that we want to refer back to throughout the lesson. And because the flip chart is sort of driving our lesson structure, we're remembering to do those things. So if I had these at the beginning of my lesson, in the middle, or sometimes I'll see teachers just put them up at the top, it's a way of remembering to do that particular, ask that question that you know you want to ask, or refer back to our learning targets, or what is our success criteria. The next thing we would like to show you is that we can send out a card to your devices, and in this case the card's really coming to you just so you can click on the link, but I'm going to send it out, and when you click on the link you're going to be taken to a website where you can look at your own digital footprint. Alright, so on the next page, if you can kind of keep in mind those numbers for yourself, we have a question for you. For which activity do you use the most water?
Let's see what happens.
It'll be interesting to see if it sends you out the same page again, but I'm going to give it a try.
Because we're still on the footprint.
The footprint one, and I'm going to send out a new question, which is just the multiple choice. Okay, so we can see that we have some people, one person is saying shower and bath, and oh, by the way, if I wanted to hide the student names, if I wanted to make this anonymous so that people do not have to be embarrassed by their answers, you can toggle student names up here. In fact, that's probably the way I prefer to have this. Teachers can always go back in later to check results. And this just allows for students to be a little more honest with their answers. So we can see that one person uses a lot for laundry. That's probably where my family would be too. The next activity could be having students actually come up to the board. So we've seen a lot of send stuff out, but another way to use Classflow is if you're teaching a lesson with students and having them come up to the board. So yours and then it'll kind of pop back into place. And then as if you were the student, I'd have you pick the next person. But the idea here is students can come up to the board, they can interact with graphs. If this was just a graph for a class around a question, I'm thinking of younger kids when they come in, you wanting to do a quick graph activity with them daily, you can always change what the question is. Each day you could ask them a different question, have them come up to the board, talk about graphing. It's kind of that more interactive approach to, we could write a chart, that would work too, but this is kind of something that's easy for me to recreate rather than having to do charts every day. The other thing is, again, that idea, if it's there, I'll remember to do it. You can put in language supports for students. These aren't probably the best examples of sentence frames, but if you have the question that you want them to ask, I have one of my essential questions up here. It reminds me to talk to my students and say, hey, we're working on what we can do within the community to make a change. Right now, we've done this, this, and this, and I'd like you to turn and talk with your partner and answer this question. What could you do to reduce your water footprint? And then using these sentence frames. So I have also put in here, well, I'll show you some other sentence frames. I wanted to discuss how those can evolve over time a little bit. But quickly, just rate yourself as a water conservationist again. I would send this out to students. I would compare it with our data from before and just see how they've changed. I'm not going to send it out again right now because I think you guys have the idea. This was what I wanted to show you, just about how things can evolve as you understand your students better. So we have been working in a math cycle, an integrated math cycle, with a math specialist, with me, and with an English language arts specialist. And we're going into classrooms and we're teaching math. And as we're looking at student work together with the teachers that are in the cycle with us, we're noticing things. So our first sentence frame the teacher came up with looked like this. I blanked because in the problem, and we were wanting to get people back into thinking about what the problem actually says, get the students up there. And we wanted to give them examples of what students look like when they were talking in partner groups. So that really helped students get an idea of what partner talk looked like. But we found that what the kids were saying wasn't exactly what we were looking for, or they weren't understanding that we were wondering how the quantities fit into the problem. So then we became a little more explicit with our language frames for them. We realized they needed the words drew or use. We wanted to give them some options. So we built in some options into their language frame. We wanted to keep the idea, if you can slide this down, we actually also put the word problem in there because we realized our students needed the word problem to refer back to it and we weren't providing it on the page. Later, we were able to take that out because they had the paper in front of them with the word problem on it. And then we wanted to get less about what tools they were using and more about comparing and contrasting. But then we found that they were talking more about, I created a 10 frame, and we were really wanting them to look at the quantities. So again, we removed a scaffold, we removed some of those words so we could get more to what we were looking at. And I think this is an important idea for teachers and for student teachers, is that idea of start with something basic. Think about what you want to do with your students, and then you're going to alter it as a response to what you see the students doing. And then that idea of building in things as you find you need them can be less overwhelming than thinking that you're going to have all of this for your first lesson. So if student teachers understand they can start with just a skeleton that maybe drives their instruction, and as they see that they need supports for the students, build those in. And I think the other thing we built in with this teacher was starting with behavior expectations, because she was just kind of launching right into the lessons. And we added in our learning goals and targets. They're actually, you can't see them on these pages, but they're always on the side of her presentations. So she can refer to them whenever she needs to.
Just logging into Classflow, I can start a quick poll right from the top. This is the same stuff that we were doing with you earlier. The same types of questions are all here. Andrea's still in there. Students could sign up the same way. They would only have to use that 5-digit thing, QR9TR. Your name will always be the same, so eventually your kids are just gonna remember that. And then the different types of questions you could send. One of the easiest things to send to get them actually collaborating and going is the creative, which will give them a card, as they call it.
Sort of a blank slate.
A blank slate where they could write, use annotations, you take pictures as was done earlier, add text, add shapes, or whatever it is you want them to do. So Instant Whiteboard is very much like what Active Inspire will give you when you first open up the Active Inspire program. I know you're familiar with it. Are you familiar with Active Inspire at all, Donna? Okay. So I'll explain Active Inspire for just a second. We got these Promethean boards. They just show your computer, but they're very big and they take up a lot of classroom space. And what a lot of teachers still need is a whiteboard.
Because they put them right in front of their whiteboards.
Yeah. And in a lot of school districts around the world, they eliminated the whiteboards altogether and it was a replacement rather than. But anyway, so what Active Inspire was a way to take the things you could do with the Promethean board, in addition to going on the internet and doing this, that, and the other, and giving you a whiteboard space, giving you a space where you could use this as a whiteboard. And in fact, the generic term for these things is interactive whiteboard to start with. But, so yeah, this instant whiteboard is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a whiteboard where you could write your morning message, you could have kids come up to the board and write, whatever you would do with a whiteboard.
Right, and I will argue that it's a little bit more than a whiteboard because with my whiteboard, if I needed to take whatever I had from math down, because now I need to do language arts, I had to erase the whiteboard and it was all gone. With this, I have the ability to just add in a new card, which you can see down below where Miguel is, and I can just continue to add. It's like having a replaceable whiteboard
And you can always come back to the
anytime, and
work
you
you
can
did
always go
before.
back. So you can save that as a lesson as well. So I tell student teachers, if you've got a lesson or if your teacher's up there, write math and just start, and then look at what you've done. Oh, I did my launch, and then the next thing I did, and that can help build that structure.
Yeah, and this button, by the way, shows and hides what they're calling the carousel, which is just your list of
slides.
your slide viewer like in PowerPoint. And I can just keep adding that, different cards. And any of these cards at any point, if I did have students connected to me, I could send to you to work on, do the work, and send back to me. And there are ways, although we haven't tested it yet, to send different cards to different groups of students. So you can differentiate that way. That's something I would like to try. So we've got some whiteboard, start a quick poll, create a lesson. That would be doing something like we created the water lesson that way from scratch. Some of the pages, we actually, they were a flip chart in Active Inspire, and you can take your Active Inspire flip charts and convert them into what are they calling Classflow lessons, and
Yeah, so
generally works pretty well.
if teachers have their lessons in Active Inspire and then maybe the student teachers don't have Active Inspire on their computers, there is a way to go through and convert them, and then the student teacher would have access to lessons maybe that the teacher had already built.
Right. I guess Create Quiz Assessment is a similar kind of thing, where you can create quizzes that would show up on your flip chart pages, and different types as well. Just like with the you don't want to stay with multiple choice, short answer, math question, true, false, essay, creative response. So that'll look familiar.
And
This
it
is
does
just a way to kind of front
It
load it.
takes time to build though, so.
Yeah, honestly, like
It's probably a
I-
higher level than most student teachers will get to in the first,
Mhm.
I think you'd have to be pretty familiar with.
or
it.
many teachers would bother with, considering you have the quick poll and it does collect the data for you. So, why spend an hour before your lesson the night before? Yeah.
And for me personally, when I think of sending information out to my students and getting it back, it's a quick formative assessment for me to
Yeah.
kind of get the temperature of the class. I never had time to really go back and dig deep into what my students did. I think if I was sending out a card and they were interacting and maybe doing student work, that would be something I'd go back and look at. But a quick poll or something like that, it's a quick on-the-fly formative assessment.
Again, it drives your lesson as you're doing it.
So while this can do summative assessments, there's so many other ways that we do those.
These are the different tabs. So the home is your main kind of dashboardy area. It'll of course give you links that other things you can look at. Your classes are some of the classes that you've made already. So there you'll see the instant whiteboard session that we did, the SDSU Promethean class we did, some of the polls that we
So that would be where
did.
you'd go back to look for that information if you wanted to
Right.
analyze it more or revisit it. It's kind of like Facebook. It's a running,
A lot of this is modeled after
Yeah.
social media. That's kind of
just
like,
a running tab of what you've created and what you've done. And
you do have quick links to the same stuff I just showed you, like your instant whiteboard and your quick poll, just in case like, hey, I'm working on this and kids wanna, I can send a quick poll from here too. So they make that available from pretty much anywhere. You can make your actual classes. So this is where I could maybe I have, period 1, 2, 3, 4, and I could actually put in my students and have them all registered so that we don't have to do that every time.
so the students would log in, they'd choose your class, and they'd be in.
Right, and I don't even think they
They
have
may not
to.
have to log in at that point.
They wouldn't have to log in, and they wouldn't have to use your code. What would happen is, no, maybe they would. They would have to use your code, but then they would choose their name from the list that pops up. Yeah, that's what happens. I haven't really. One of the things that makes this a little bit awkward compared to what I've done in the past, 7 years, is I actually used Active Inspire to teach. With this, I don't have any real-world experience with Classflow with 37 kids. That's actually why I liked doing this, and why you're kind of my guinea pigs too. But I want to be able to take this and use it in my capacity through the district too. I was like, okay, we saw this happen, and this didn't work, and let's find out why. That's your My Resources. Classflow resource packs, there are some things that it gives you. These are pre-made resources you can add to your lessons. And a lot of these you can download from the marketplace. You can also connect this to your Dropbox, your Google Drive. This is something I do like.
Right, so if my images were already uploaded into Google Drive, then I could just pull them in directly.
And I believe, oh look,
Yeah,
it's
it's got
my
your folder.
folks. You could bring in your Google Classroom stuff too. So people who are using Google Classroom already can actually merge, which is really nice. I'm doing a great project with Coverly. I'm very excited about this. With Project Lead the Way.
So drawings and pictures and
Mhm.
Google Docs will get just automatically synced into your lessons where you want to put them.
And then the marketplace.
Marketplace.
Yeah. So this is where you can get pre-made stuff. You can refine your searches by subject area, grade level, the file format. So I did want to point out, lesson is something that's used in Classflow online only. Flipchart is something you can download and use with Active Inspire. So if you wanted something that you can download that I can put in Active Inspire, which a lot of our teachers are asking about right now.
Yeah, and a lot of people will make images public, or they'll share them with Classflow. So
Mhm.
rather than having to go and find mine and upload them, and
Right.
you can search through the images that exist in Classflow already. So the marketplace is really kind of cool because you do have the ability to find full lessons that someone else created. And it means that you spend less time in creation mode and more time in kind of determining what you want to do.
And they have models, simulations, calculators, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So by going into the marketplace, looking for the fraction model, and I think it's not under flip charts, it's under.
Is there a Classflow lesson?
I think it actually was a Classflow lesson, but I don't remember. And I might have put fraction models in there, but you can search through what other people have, and people have created those different math manipulatives, and you are able to have an unlimited amount of them. So there's, you put them into your chart, kids can come up, they can click and drag and make a copy of whatever they need and have multiple, an unlimited supply of pennies or an unlimited supply of whatever you're needing, and then they can truly show what they're thinking. So there are whole lessons here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I would look up what I was interested in teaching, maybe download 5 different lessons that someone else created and just kind of pick and choose from what I liked and recreate my own. I can look in the marketplace, I can go to resources, look in the marketplace folder, and anything that I've downloaded is coming into here. So now it belongs to me. I can open it, double clicking on it, and I enter edit mode. So now I'm in edit mode. I can look for the slides that I like. I can see if there's any interactivity with them. And let's just say that I like this one. When I click on that little gear, one of the options is to, it was not enough.
No, that's it. You're in the right place. It's copy card to another lesson.
Thank you.
Yep.
I was looking for insert card to another lesson. And then when I have that other lesson that I want to, I would click in. And unfortunately, right now, you have to do that one card at a time.
I've already made the request to do multiple at once.
But it will put it into whatever lesson, so we can put it into untitled lesson here. And then we select. And it will now, when I go to that lesson, show up in that lesson.
Yeah, and it gives you a button there in case you want to go to it right now.
Yeah, so we can go see it in there. I think the untitled lesson is one of those cards that we were sending out.
Now in Active Inspire, I don't know, Andrea, if you're
Say it,
familiar
show it,
with this. In Active Inspire, this was all much click and drag, quick.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a little slower, but you do have the possibility of adding to it. I think it's going to new, and then we would say new lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to bring me into just a blank lesson. So the first thing I like to do is give it a title. And what should I give it a title of? Miguel?
SDSU
From
lesson.
scratch? You know what I'll do, since this is in my brain right now, we have the problems in context.
Oh, right. Number talk?
Or math learning, number talks.
Number talks.
About that.
Yeah.
So I've gone ahead, I've written in a title that way I'll be able to find it again. I'm not exactly sure what the sections do, except maybe if you are planning a multi-day lesson, or to kind of break it up a bit more visually for the, I don't believe you can interact with those section things very much. I can give it, I can change the background color, which is sort of fun, but I don't even know where you look for images or something.
If you go to My Resources, you could look for images through Bing.
Oh, so
Yeah.
that's where you found your image.
That's where I found my image. But it's not worth it, to be frank. Yeah.
Yeah, it puts an image in there, but I can't tap on it and show it to my students. So it's really more, I think, for the teacher.
You can make it the head, the point is you can make it the head of a unit. And if you wanted it to be the first thing that came up, you would have to click on the gear for it and set it as your first page that shows up when you deliver it. So if you click the gear for that one, yeah, you would say set cover card. And now that makes, see little ribbons there now? Now if you deliver it, that's the first thing you're gonna see is the person jumping.
Yeah, so
And that'll be like your cover
I'll come
card.
onto the first card, and on the first card, you might want to have a title.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come up and use the text box. It'll say click here to add text. I can throw in number talks. And this is where that mouse comes in handy.
Mm-hmm.
Problems in context.
Yeah. Moving it around might be actually easier up at the board.
Yeah. I can grab the handlebars to make the title more in a straight line. I don't know if there's a quick way to change the fonts here, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I can change the size using the little font box over here. I can change the font.
Yeah, very similar to a word processing program.
Not a whole lot of choices in my fonts, but in a way that's kind of good because then it's not too.
There's a joke about that. It's like, I spent all night just trying to find my font.
Change the colors. Well, I honestly think when you're doing lessons, having less is more. One thing for students to think about is the classroom. If it's a very dark classroom, or I'm going to say actually in all of our classrooms, you want a white background. With the higher the contrast between the words and the background, probably the better, given the state that our bulbs are in. And again, a judicious amount of words on the page So I try not to put a whole lot of
Concise.
animations, a whole lot of different colors can just be distracting.
I use the rule of
background
sevens.
patterns.
No more than 7 words in a sentence, no more than 7 sentences on a page.
Yeah, and I think really just what is your purpose for this card? This might just be my introduction slide. I can come down and add my new card here. I can't type my note
Because of
top it, I'm
your
gonna-
screencasting guy.
Darn it. That's gonna make me pause my thing. How do I add one
No,
without?
no, if you go right to the corner there, you'll be able to click it. There you go.
Okay. All right, so on this slide again, maybe it's a text box with a math problem, or maybe I want to tell my students, well, we have a 3 reads protocol, so I think I'll go with that. The first part of our protocol is just to visualize the story problem. And again, I would just, it's kind of our launch for our math talk that we do.
What if you wanted to make this one interactive?
Excellent question.
So, if I wanted to send a card out, I just create the card. And then when I'm delivering the lesson, so right now we're in creation mode, but when I go into deliver mode, the quickest way to add the interaction is just on the fly to do it here, if that makes sense. So now I can, if I was delivering this to my students and I say, hey, number talks, problems and contexts.
And remember, if you deliver it this way, it's going to be read-only. So you're going to want to deliver it as a creative card.
You mean over here?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so I would want to send out a creative card to my students, or if I had a, oops, and I just did. Let me get back here. In edit mode, if I had a number problem up here, I could send it out to my students and say, let's go ahead and solve the problem now.